Excellent. Yeah, we wanted to, let's inject some energy into the room.
Yeah, let's get everyone up.
Sounds good. All right, everybody's stand up.
Let's move a little.
Let's move a little.
I
So,
didn't have my yoga class this morning.
yes. All right, well, there you go. Let's stretch.
Let's stretch
Yeah,
a little
stretch.
bit.
So I think Frank we're going to be working a little bit backwards, right? So Frank
your
just give you a
hands.
bit of a PhD class.
Rub hands with the person next to you if you're okay with that. I'm a germaphobe,
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah,
that's
please.
a bit scary for me. But if you do that, you're sharing energy. All right, let's have a seat.
It's good. All right, that was a physical exercise. So
Yes.
that was the first moment. But we'll have a little bit of a mental exercise as well. I think which we can all do together. So Frank very generously gave us a bit of a PhD class in thinking through a lot of the the technology and things like that. So Liz and I want to bring you kind of to kindergarten. So let's start experimenting.
In the heart,
exactly.
Yeah.
So let me just ask you kind of a question. It's a bit of a personal question, so my apologies if this is too personal. But can everybody just raise their hand if they can draw? So how many do we have? Cool. We got about about 60% of the room. Cool. Excellent. And I'd like everybody. Can you just raise your hand if you can sing? So a little bit less, about 20%. Okay, so 16, 20%. All right. Now, if I could ask everybody, can you close your eyes? And I want you to just imagine a kindergarten class, whether that was your kindergarten class, your children's. They're being asked the same question. How many hands are raised? All of them, right? All of them, right? So just looking at the registration list, we've got a pretty smart, this is a high IQ group, so presumably everyone went to kindergarten, I would think. What happened?
Pretty low bar.
What happened? Yeah. We all could do this, right? And now we can't. What ends up happening is actually when we're in kindergarten, right? You start to have these exams, right? And then you want to take the exam, do well on the exam, make your parents proud. Maybe they're going to put your exam on the fridge, right? So you're incentivized to demonstrate what you know. Then you get a little older. Let's say you're in high school, right? And then you want to go to a university. You want to get to a good university. You have to demonstrate what you know, right? And then you're in the university, and then you go to your first employer after you're graduating. And then you probably don't have a lot of experience and things like that, but you might have an internship, you might have your course curriculum. You're trying to demonstrate what you know. Why am I a good fit for this employer? You get to the workforce, and then you're doing well, and then you want to demonstrate what you know to your boss and say, listen, I qualify for this other position, right? You're demonstrating what you know, right? So the problem is we're incentivized, again, from kindergarten all the way through now, to demonstrate what we know, and sometimes we allow that to become an obstacle to what we can learn. And I think that's what Liz and I want to really talk to you about, is just kind of how do we then hit that reset switch, get back into this learning mode to be able to kind of absorb these things. And some of the stuff I think we can kind of talk about is, I see this thing as kind of a continuum in terms of AI development between pragmatism, which is the work that you know today, that you need to, these are problems that you have to solve today, and we need some headroom. We need to be able to kind of solve this. But then you also have the word right up there, innovating, right? We have to innovate. Innovate requires imagination, and it requires this questioning, using the Socratic method of breaking down these things and imagine possibilities, say what would need to be true in order to sort of actuate this. So one just quick exercise, right? So this is, again, now that I've gotten the weirdness out, we can be a little bit more weird. So if you don't mind closing your eyes again, and let's do a little travel. All right, so we're no longer in One Liberty Street. We're sitting in a garden, right? It's a springtime. Forget about the weather, the actual weather outside. So it's a springtime, you're sitting in a garden. You're enjoying a cup of coffee. Maybe you have a pastry in your hand. Let's think about this. What are you smelling? Maybe you're smelling the aroma of the coffee. Maybe there's a nice breeze and you're getting some flowers, right? What are you tasting? You're feeling the crunch of your croissant, Danish, or what you like. Maybe it's a chocolate chip cookie, right? What are you hearing? Maybe you're hearing silence. Through that silence, you might be starting to hear the wind bristle against some leaves or some grass. Maybe you're hearing some birds tweet, right? So you can open your eyes. In this thing, you realize that all of these different layers are happening contemporaneously, right? And some of these things will start to actualize each other, meaning they'll amplify. So, the sense of smell will then amplify your sense of taste, right? And vice versa. Sometimes these are resisting, right? Your brain, you have, one brain, sometimes you get distracted. The bird chirp makes you unable to hear the wind, right? And this is one of the things that, similar with, artificial intelligence and sort of the future of work, the future of society, and so on, there's a lot of these things that are basically interplaying against each other. They're actualizing each other. Sometimes they're resisting. Sometimes they just coexist. But I think it's really important. And Frank, I think with the integration problem in particular, he was talking about this level of connectivity and congruence, right? And that's this is the same as sort of this actualization versus resisting and so on. So I'm joined with Liz. Liz is one of the smartest people I know. So it's so it's actually, I want to stop yapping. And Liz, your background is just full of lots and lots of experience.
Yeah.
And you're kind of just getting started. So
I'm just reinventing myself again.
Tell us
why not?
about it.
So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you to all of you for showing up today. I always like to know who I'm speaking to. So how many of you are technologists, right? Because I hear a lot of it, but I don't think you're all technologists. So how many of you are? Okay, and then how many of you are maybe people folks? Okay, and then executive leadership. Okay, all right, okay, now I get a sense. So now I have the context. And thank you for sharing. So my career started off, I'm sure you won't believe this, but it started off in 1992 when I was recruited to a company at the time named Digital Equipment Corporation. And that was a time when the country was going through a recession. So a lot of my friends couldn't get jobs, but I happened to have been fortunate that in my sophomore year, I changed from being an art student to becoming an information systems student in a new field. And had a bunch of internships and the like. So what I discovered there was that while a lot of my friends had to go wait tables, I had 5 job offers by the time I finished, but by the time we went to Christmas holiday of my senior year, and I recognized, oh wow, technology really, having those kinds of skill sets are really important. Fast forward to, let's say 2000, at that point, I'd left DEC, I had worked for another company and I went to graduate school, and I was then a consultant with Arthur Andersen. And I was managing technology merger integration projects, as well as looking at some of the way that the technology was going to disrupt industries. And I wrote a piece on how technology was going to disrupt the travel industry, right? And so folks at that time, people who worked as travel, travel agents, needed to become travel managers because, they were being disintermediated by Expedia and all those platforms, right? So they had to really look at how they could add value in terms of creating unique experiences and taking the knowledge that they had in partnership with whatever platform they had access to deliver a unique experience for their customers, right? I think you kind of see where this is going. And then we fast forward to 2009 when unfortunately we were in another crisis, and at that time I was advising nonprofit organizations that were really looking to be able to raise money at a time when they couldn't do so using huge, like $1 million gala budgets. And I was like, okay, we need to go online. We need to look at how we can use different online platforms to be able to tell your story as an organization, to be able to raise money, and to be able to find new supporters. And then we get to when we had COVID-19, which I can't believe was just a couple of years ago. And organizations and folks had to really think about how to really embrace digital technology even more so because they're working from home. They had to really rethink the kind of services they offered, right? So when you look at all that, I've seen an evolution around technology and what's available to us, whether it's internet and the like. And when it came to January of 2023, it was my intern who said to me, there's this thing called ChatGPT. I want you to try it out. I tried it out and I was like, okay, well, a bit weird, but okay, let me check it out. Kept playing with it. And I literally was up for 2 days. My husband's like, are you coming to bed? I'm like, I can't. And why I was so excited about it is it's even though I'm a kind of a techie, it wasn't so much about the fact that I thought it was cool for the sake of it being cool. I thought about the fact that it could help address a lot of issues that I had. Like I used to have someone like like let's say if I had someone who was working on a social media post for me, it would take a long time to get to approve it and going back and forth. I'm like, wow, I don't have to do that. I can just do this in like one shot. I love that. Then I thought, okay, how can we help our clients to be able to integrate it into what they're doing? And then I said, well, we're also training organizations and companies how to tell their story leveraging digital storytelling. How about if I show you how to create a digital strategy leveraging Gen AI and creating prompts to help you do that, right? So for me, the way I looked at it was it created an opportunity for us to be more efficient, more effective, and get a lot more done, right? So that was what I was excited about. And so 7,000 people later, I've trained 7,000 people across the globe in 6 continents. What I found is that, you know, if you can get people to get over the fear, if you can get people to understand that it doesn't have to replace them, it actually can even make them better. And you can help, and you as leaders can understand that it's, you know, I understand that at some point we're thinking about this as, you know, we can get rid of the people in some ways, and then now we can have all these tools sort of replace them. And I think that there's some aspects of that, but I think that in my opinion, 1 + 1, so a team, 1 + 1 + AI is 10x, if not 100x improvement in what you're doing. And so I'm of the belief that we need to figure out how we can, 1, reskill our employees, 2, how we can then redevelop our processes and even kind of the way our businesses and organizations are run and the value that we're providing in such a way that we leverage this amazing technology to move us forward. That's where I come from. So it's not because of the technology. I don't really care about all the feature functions and benefits that come out all the time, like people are always excited. I'm like, how do we solve problems better with humans and technology?
It's almost like Sixth Sense.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, you're telling them out. No.
Yeah, all right.
Can we go there?
Yeah.
I don't think we can go there with this group.
Right. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. No, that's excellent. And I think, you know, even more so because your history, your interaction and everything is like super rich, right? But it's also a bit of a microcosm of this experience for other people. So do you want to ask me a question? Or you want me to ask me
I'll ask you a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're brilliant. I know that you wrote it with other people. And ironically, I'm reading this on paper. I had it on my phone, but I couldn't read it. It was too small, so I had to have it printed out. So your article, AI and Labor, which was amazing, change is inevitable, but human capabilities remain essential. You know, a piece I want to talk about is balancing efficiency with human-centric roles. And the article emphasizes AI's role in enhancing efficiency and productivity while highlighting the indispensable nature of human capabilities in tasks requiring emotional intelligence, creativity, and complex decision-making. How can organizations effectively balance the drive for AI-induced efficiency with the need to preserve and promote human-centric roles, which is kind of what I was saying.
Sure, yeah, no, I think that's a lovely question. We actually, we wanted to kind of, you know,
and full disclosure,
yeah.
ChatGPT and I worked on this together.
Okay,
just
so
you know.
hybrid. So
that's why you love it. Yeah, I lean in. I don't have a problem sharing that's what's going on here.
So one thing in the paper, and so there's I think there's a physical magazine that's in the waiting area as well. Or if you go to spglobal.ai, we have a full website. I think we're up to about 42 articles that we published on various sort of topics. But we have this magazine I'm particularly proud of, and that article. I want to call Shu. Yeah, there's Shu. All right, there's Shu was my partner in crime on this labor article, and what we had done was actually break down the skills. So in terms of labor is not just jobs. It's also basically what are tasks, what are skills to then accomplish those tasks, what are jobs that are sort of a corpus of some of these tasks, what are occupations that are part of some of these jobs, and then ultimately how does this sort of impact the economy and things like that, which kind of gets at your question of there's a lot of things where you're solving the problem, but you're also generating a new capability.
Right.
And that
the new capability, and I love that, that coming from that.
And it's I think that's how organizations they increasingly have to think this way about not just the ROI on the actual sort of job done, but what capability are you generating in the process, the discovery, all of these kinds of things. How do you harness that in terms of either whether it's a knowledge network or being able to kind of facilitate, employee growth, employee development, and things like that to kind of rise the boats, or rise the tide rather. So, and the capability generation is huge because once you apply once you apply leverage to that, you're generating a ton of ROI.
Yep.
But you have to not think about the ROI in order to generate the capability, right? And then I think in between, and we touched on this on the paper as well, is that there's this very cleverly named transitional period where you need to focus not on the capability generation and not on the ROI, but rather where will this capability live?
Yep.
How are you able to actualize that? What does that mean in terms of training requirements for your existing workforce? But also, how do I then make my organization an organization of choice for future employment? What are those skills? And I think once it's almost like a flywheel. If you guys we have the physicists later on, but if you have this flywheel where you have to start that spin and then it starts moving and moving and moving, I think that's kind of how to recognize with talent development programs, talent acquisition programs, and so on. It's the ROI. We got some stuff to do, but we also have to generate capabilities because I think economic dynamics are flattening.
Yes.
You're going to have a lot of compression, and if you're not really good at being able to learn, being able to actualize that learning, and being able to create sort of new value, sometimes that doesn't even exist, it's going to be very, very difficult to compete. You may not be able to compete.
It'll be disintermediated.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just along the same lines, what are some of the roles you think are going to come out? Like, what are some of the roles we haven't even thought of that are going to we'll be hiring for?
Yeah, I think, well, so there's going to be changes in existing roles. So I think the most simple will be labor replacement. So like, I think it's one of these things that nobody in their right mind actually wants to be shoveling coal into a fire, right? It's not, I guess maybe somebody, I haven't met them yet. But I think it's one of these things that a lot of these things in terms of, mining large swaths of information and things like that, there's a lot of drudgery, associated. So some of those tasks at a task level may very well be replaced.
Right.
And I can give you an example. In the 90s, I guess late 80s, early 90s, when the spreadsheet was developed, there was this whole talk about, oh my God, this is going to be the death of the accounting profession. Yeah, Lotus 1, 2, 3. There's going to be this death of the accounting profession, right? And what really happened was there's not really any state change in terms of the number of accountants that's employed, but financial analysts have grown like 1,000-fold, since then, because they're basically using the output. So I think that's some of the stuff that we're going to, a lot of jobs are going to be created on using the output of this combination of human workforce,
Absolutely.
AI workforce. Once you bring in agents into the equation, then I think we're going to need some of the things you talked about in terms of emotional intelligence, empathy, and we're going to have to talk to robots, right? So that skill we're going to have to learn, and then that's going to result in entirely new job founds. One thing, I was very fortunate, actually, the guys from IBM had invited me to their research facility. And the gentleman that was sitting next to me at the table, he was actually using LLMs in a very, very novel way that I hadn't thought of. So like, and Frank had touched on this idea, it's called multimodal. So modalities would be things like structured information, textual information, graphics, charts, video, and so on. This gentleman was actually using the periodic table of elements as the language. Yeah. And then he was basically synthesizing all of the chemical compounds, basically the Cartesian product of every chemical compound that you could synthesize, to be sort of a new language, so to speak, to be able to have treatments for disease management and pharmaceutical development and things like that. So I think that's just, it's one example, but a bit of a mind-blowing one of just what's really possible when you say, okay, we're not talking about just human languages, we're not talking about just computer languages. You could start to interpret the syntax of anything as a language and then do so much more with it. Right.
No, I agree with you, and I think that, like you said, we haven't even scratched the surface in terms of the innovations, because that's the world you live in, the innovations that are possible between humans and AI working together collaboratively, because I think that's the opportunity. There's a lot of fear, and everyone's afraid that AGI, Frank, I don't know where Frank is, who really was speaking about things being so separate. I look at everything being interconnected, and I actually think that if we can embrace it as being just sort of an extension of who we are, and really lean into it, I think what is possible is pretty extraordinary.
Let's pull on that thread? So,
sure.
Liz, I know it's 6 continents, right?
Yeah.
And I know of some of the work that you've done in Asia,
sure.
some of the work in Africa. Take your pick, or pick both. Can you tell us some of the stories about, how some of this work integration has been, especially like on developing economies or emerging markets and things like that? Because I think that would be valuable perspective for all of us to learn.
Let me think. So I was in Rwanda in June of last year at the African Leadership University. They had their inaugural AI summit. So they invited a professor from Stanford and I to sort of serve in residence during that week. And I focus more on helping the students understand how to integrate generative AI into their storytelling in terms of like their personal brands and looking for jobs, looking at how they could then also integrate it into the projects that we're working on. And then Meta also hosted a hackathon for them, so I helped them kind of figure out how they could create better pitch presentations and decks for the competition. And one of the things that I learned from just kind of working with these young people, and these are students who are coming from all over the African continent. There are about 150 or so of them. And when at some point I said, I want you to show me like what you're working on. Like I want to see, like I showed them how to use Udio because I love Udio, and like they generated songs for me and they generated videos and things like that. But when it came to the hackathon, what I thought was incredible was the hackathon wasn't just about, it was about solving a social impact issue, right? Using the platform. And this young man started off his pitch by saying, years ago, my father was sick, and we were in a country that, we didn't know the language. And my father died because the people who were supposed to treat him couldn't understand him. So the solution that he came up with in this hackathon was basically a language accessibility tool that when you go into a hospital, whatever environment, that you're able to communicate whatever it is in, let's say in French, and they can hear it in English or whatever and then respond, right? Now that seems like a very simple application of AI, but it's life-saving, right? Yeah. So I think what I'm seeing is we are looking at these huge sort of, I think we have the opportunity to solve some basic issues and accessibility and the like that can solve people's, can save people's lives, but at the same time also help people with accessing the job opportunities to be able to innovate in the companies that they're working in. So that was just one example. But if I continue on, I was just in Taiwan and Japan.
Okay.
And there I was with an organization that trains sommeliers, right? So, and who drinks wine here? Okay, so you know what a sommelier is,
The
right?
other half is lying.
Right, okay, so in this particular instance, these are young people who, who want to improve their economic prospects. And so they're taking this course from this organization, and it's delivered by an American who does not speak Japanese or Mandarin. And so the challenge was, how do we make this accessible to people? So again, language accessibility. So I was like, well, there's a platform called Wordly AI. I'm not compensated by them, so it's not, I don't have any skin in the game. But we literally can do live translation as as the instructor is speaking in English, right? And so you can either listen, you can read or do both. And at the end of it, the students had to take an exam. So I showed them how to use it, they used it, they took an exam, and we had about 97% pass rate. And one of the young men came to me afterwards, and he showed me on his phone, he translated on his own AI, saying, your AI helped me to pass this exam. Now, why is this important in terms of, you're saying, well, they're beverage professionals, but the fact of the matter is their ability to pass this exam increases their earning capabilities significantly, right? So it's looking at that, the economic unlock that happens for someone in a very simple solution like that, yep. Okay? So I think that's an important thing to consider. There's a young man in Uganda who actually was, he founded an organization in 2018. It's called Barefoot Law, okay? And he actually was one of the social entrepreneurs of the year at the World Economic Forum last year. Okay. And basically what he did was he found a way to use AI to enable people who wanted access to legal services to be able to access those legal services using, whether it was through chat, through Facebook messages, emails, and the like, to be able to understand whatever information they needed.
Yep.
And in the past, when they just contacted his attorneys, each attorney could maybe handle like 10 cases a day.
Yeah.
Now with this integration of AI, they can handle upwards of 100 cases a day.
Okay.
So again,
Market.
and what happens, what's amazing about it is that it doesn't matter if you're not, it doesn't matter what language you're sending it in, and it doesn't matter the level of education you have. It can understand what you're saying, and then the attorney just sort of literally just, the ChatGPT, let's say, is able to kind of draft an answer, and then the attorney is able to approve it and then send it back in the type of language or the level of education of the recipient.
Okay, that's amazing.
Yeah. So again, there's simple things, but they make a very big difference, I think.
And they're cumulative.
Yeah, it's cumulative, right? And so for me, the excitement isn't necessarily just on that platform. I was talking to him and I said, how else can you use this platform? Because you have this amazing platform. This is one application, but there's so many other applications, and they're going to be replicating it throughout the Commonwealth.
Right.
That model.
Okay. So it expands like.
It's expanding tremendously. And here in the U.S., we were at the conference in Boston where we were with compliance professionals,
yeah.
right? And and compliance folks want to make sure that everything's done safely. But the reality is, when we talk about AI, a lot of folks don't understand that your employees are actually using like a free version of ChatGPT. And what happens is when they do that, then they're actually putting your data at risk, right? Right. And that's one thing. So it's really important that companies think about creating policies, being able to really come up with solutions that work for folks, right? And so that you don't have unauthorized use, right? That's what I found, because they are using it. And so it's really about embracing, and I know the people in this room are among those who are already converted, but I can say to you that it's happening, it's not going away, and we need to figure out how to do it responsibly.
Yep. Yeah, and then things like governance and things like that come
absolutely
straight into the fold, because what is that? An ounce of prevention is whatever the end of that saying is, but it's that, right?
Right.
It's just like recognizing that there's so much risk that you're just going to undertake by doing everything after the fact.
Yeah.
And we actually kind of, and I guess extending that, right, is just, so AI can help with that, the imagination and things like that. And you could start engaging with a risk conversation to figure out what are these different sort of biases, what are these different risks that I need to be aware of, and then designing, compliance programs, governance programs, and so on. Right,
and working with the people who are going to have to work on this, right? Because I think that we tend to do things in a vacuum, but I think we need to work collaboratively on all of this as well, in terms of bringing folks into those governance conversations, the actual users, the actual people, right? Because I think there's always a separation, but I think we should be working together. The other thing that I found is that, we're looking at this like this whole new thing, but again, because I've been in technology for 30 some odd years,
we won't talk about that.
But I already told them, so it doesn't matter. It's like we can take the learnings from the earlier revolution, the earlier part of this evolution, and apply them to where we are, right? So it's just a new unlock, but it's not really that different.
Yep.
It enables us to do more things, but shouldn't be scary. It's just the next part of this evolution.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the clock as well, because I want to take some audience questions.
Okay.
But so let's close out this part, right? Because if I'm to be so bold as interpret sort of a theme from what you're saying, it's not just about harvesting the fruit. But it's also recognizing that after the consumption of the fruit, you also have these seeds that then generate the next crop and things like that. So that cycle is continuing, both in terms of labor development, and that labor development can improve the person as an employee, but they're also a consumer.
Right.
And that opens up a bunch of different markets that didn't exist before, because now you're spinning that flywheel. And then that has economic ramifications, it has societal ramifications, and it actually fosters this integration of various kind of, there would otherwise be disparate pieces. Right. But now it's all one ecosystem.
Yes. One thing I want to add, though, is that that sort of the disruption that we're going to see, right? So DeepSeek wasn't surprising to me, because I think we see disruption where you have resource constraints. is if you think about in Kenya, the reason why M-Pesa, a mobile money platform, came out of there and not the US is because you had such a high level of unbanked people, right? So they had to think about it, and they weren't encumbered by existing infrastructure, right? So I think in a way, going back to that kindergarten analogy, we need to actually think fresh. We need to really look at this as a new opportunity for us to create new things, because I think if we just add it to what we're already doing, then we're not going to really realize the full potential of it. And so I wasn't surprised when I saw DeepSeek happen, because I was like, well, they had resource constraints, so they had to figure out a way around it. So I think the next unicorns are going to come from places that you don't expect, because that's where they're resource constrained. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what happens, but I also want to make sure that, the U.S. is also poised to be able to leverage this.
Keep on those bad places. Excellent. So I think, Kyle's there. We have some mic runners. Let's take some audience questions. I think we have, Nathan, we have time, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, super. Let's take some audience questions. Please.
My name is Sudeep John. You talked about security of the data. There was the same allegiance there about the privacy of the data, right? So I think, can you talk more about where you see in the use cases where the security is being impinged when you're looking at AI and when you're using the AI tools? What are the guardrails that you see being put in place, or what do you see as the guardrails that will be put in place to help that? And I think that might be, it's being discussed in the regulatory landscape too.
Sure.
Across Europe, there is different regulatory regimes which talk about, DORA versus GDPR. Do you see AI and the way you query AI being affected by regulatory landscape globally? And if so, what should we be watching out when we build solutions with AI?
Easy question. That was pretty dense. Let's pull on the thread. So I think it's one of these things that I don't want to. I don't want to have a cop out and say that it really starts with sort of employee training.
But it does.
But it does.
But it definitely. I mean, it does, because we're not doing that as much of that, but we need to.
Right. Exactly. So it's just kind of like, I think it's one of these. It's a great opportunity to kind of think about what is that signal chain, and then where are the different points where risk can sort of enter the system, and then what are the active risk controls and passive risk controls? I'll give you an analogy, right? So if you take a train, right? So some of you may appreciate this, but I think for the area, right? So when you're taking a commuter train, let's say it's the subway, let's say it's a commuter line and things like that. When the trains come to the station, you hear this tss noise. So then if you kind of imagine, okay, what's going on here, right? So there's air pressure that's being pressed, against the calipers to stop the train. So if you think about, okay, if this is an active process where once I'm coming to the station, I have to activate, this brake, then what happens when the airline is punctured or so on, when there's a failure? The train can't stop. It's a catastrophic failure. So then you have to think about, okay, well, what's an alternative? And then you can say, okay, what if I passively design this system to say that, okay, the default position is that the brakes are held up, and then I apply air pressure to release the brake, right? So the default position when something goes wrong is to stop the train. So I think in terms of and that's called a passive risk control. So when you're designing these systems, you have to think about what are the different systems that could be catastrophic. Those should be passive risk controls. And then you should have systems that are basically preventing the bad thing from happening. And then for the other stuff, you need active risk controls, where employee training really comes into the fold to say, here are the signals that once you see these, the smoke signals, you need to be able to do something about it, right? And I think in terms of as a system, and this goes into the regulatory framework, unfortunately, a lot of the regulatory frameworks that we have now are punitive in nature.
Exactly.
So it's basically like, some bad has to happen, and then you essentially, make somebody whole. But with AI, a lot of these consequences can be disastrous. So I think if you prevent the problem from occurring, that would be a lot better, but that requires a different type of regulation, which is incentive-based regulation. And I think some of the things that the proposals with the UN and some other ones are basically saying, like, okay, how do we then say, what are the partnership opportunities between governments, corporations, nonprofits, and so on, that can incentivize, proper governance and a regulatory framework that people agree on to prevent the things from happening, as opposed to a punitive one. I think that's kind of the discussion tone that I'm hearing from a lot of different regulatory frameworks, partially because looking backwards is just like it doesn't work anymore, especially for this. So,
at all.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Does that sort of answer? There's a complex question. Are you got the thoughts going? Okay.
Hi, thanks. I was interested in what you were talking about, education and training the workforce, but I was curious to take it back to primary and secondary school. My concern there is that we may have a primary and secondary school system that is preparing kids for a world that will not exist when they graduate. What are your thoughts on what children could be thinking of now to prepare themselves even, or their parents thinking about it?
Can I address that one?
Yeah, please.
I was actually just interviewed by Ed Week about this very topic. I actually think the nature of our educational system has to change. Like, in terms of what we're teaching, the goal as well, and even just the fact that we're always teaching to the middle, right? But with AI, you have the opportunity to personalize learning, right? Learning journeys for people. And then we have to also think about what it is that we're preparing them for in the future. So I think we have to kind of be a little bit looser in terms of the way that we need to start all over. I guess we need to start all over, and I know that that's like heresy, but it is what it is. We do need to start all over, and then we have to think about this from bringing different stakeholders together to come up with a solution in terms of what do the employers need, what does society need, what is it that the AI can unlock that is different from what human beings can bring to the table, and look at it a lot more holistically. I don't think I don't believe that that's gonna happen, but I think that is what's going to take, because the reality is, I teach at NYU, right, and I speak to a lot of educators, and they're like, well, I don't want to use AI in my classrooms. I think that, and I'm like, okay, the ship has sailed. So like, that's not even the conversation, right? And so I, as an educator, need to figure out, how do I develop my curriculum in such a way that I'm helping my students to unlock the technology in a way that will make them more productive? Because I teach adults, right? So how do I help them? And what is it that how do I work with whatever platforms I'm using to kind of make sure that my curriculum is more responsive to the students, and that I'm really understanding what they need, right? And so again, the theme I feel that we have here, and again, going back to Frank talked about the separation. I really believe that moving forward, we need to work together. We need to work together, various sectors. We need to also, have you ever imagined asking kids what they want to learn, how they want to learn, right? Like, kids spend their time gaming. So how do we gamify more and that kind of thing? So I think that it requires a philosophical shift for us to be able to address this. I'm somewhat of an idealistic person, but that's how I see it.